This week, we flipped the script. In the Leadership and Communications segment, CISA releases Cyber Defense Alignment Plan for federal agencies. UnitedHealth Group CISO, we had to start over after the Change Healthcare attack. 20 essential strategies for leadership development success, and more. Next, we welcome Shivan Ramji. He's the president, Customer Identity Cloud at Okta, to discuss authentication and authorization in the AI area. Business Security Weekly starts now.
This is a Security Weekly production for security professionals by security professionals. Please visit securityweekly.com/subscribe to subscribe to all the shows on our network.
It's the show where we explore the business of security to improve the security of business. Your trusted source for actionable insights on leadership, communication, and innovation. Get ready for Business Security Weekly. Your customers' and employees' identities are your responsibility to keep safe. But who is helping you stay safe from identity-based threats? Identity is the key to getting security right. And with the right identity partner, so much more is possible for your business than you thought. From strengthening cybersecurity, to increasing revenue, to reducing inefficiencies and costs, Okta unlocks growth and new possibilities for its customers. Go to securityweekly.com/Okta to learn more about Okta and the company's commitment to leading the fight against identity attacks. ThreatLocker implements a least privileged approach to cybersecurity, blocking every executable unless specifically authorized by your team. This methodology mitigates ransomware, supply chain attacks, and zero-day exploits, and ensures 24/7, 365 protection for your organization. To learn more about how ThreatLocker can help prevent known and unknown threats in your digital environment, safeguard your data and operations from threat actors, and align your organization with respected compliance frameworks, visit securityweekly.com/ThreatLocker. If your organization is ready to enhance cyber resilience, we have important insights for you. The Level Blue Futures Report 2024 sheds light on how rapid computing changes affect IT visibility. Our research reveals that while IT leaders see positive outcomes, 85% acknowledge increased risk. In this report, we identify the barriers to cyber resilience, the challenges impacting cybersecurity, and the business context that reveal operational issues. You'll also discover what's on the horizon and 5 essential steps for prioritizing cyber resilience. Get your complimentary copy of this crucial research today by visiting securityweekly.com/Level Blue. Cybersecurity simplified.
Welcome to Business Security Weekly. This is episode number 365, recorded September 23rd, 2024. I am your host, Matt Alderman. Joining me today for our article segment are my co-hosts. First, Mr. Jason Albuquerque. Welcome, Jason.
Week 3 of the NFL. Patriots got taken out by the Jets. Hey, listen, I didn't think the Saints were going to get beat, but the Eagles came in and took them out. So talk about high-powered defense against high-powered offense. Woo, look out.
There were some weird games this weekend. Look, the Browns just stink, folks. Deshaun Watson is a train wreck. Yeah. But Houston's a pretty good team. They got dismantled by Minnesota this weekend.
Yep.
The Chiefs struggled a little bit against the Falcons. And I'm not surprised the Cowboys lost because I'm not a big Dak Prescott fan. And ever since he signed that contract, he has not looked good 3 games in a row.
Right.
I'm just saying. So it was an interesting week of games.
Yeah, totally. Sure. And your old stomping grounds, the Broncos, they look pretty good this weekend.
Yeah, which is the other one. They look like crap for 2 weeks in a row, and then they play. My daughter's like, oh my gosh, they're actually winning. This is real, folks. Oh, crazy.
It was a good week 3 though, except for my Patriots.
Yes, I know. Hey, but come on, they're in a rebuilding structure that it's not too bad where they're sitting right now. So
yeah. I have some confidence in the upcoming years. Maybe not this season, but
yeah, we'll see. Also joining Mr. Ben Carr. Welcome, Ben.
Hey, Matt. How's it going?
Good.
Having a good day here in Texas. Did a little fishing this weekend with the sun. So, yeah, it's a fun weekend.
Yeah, I think we're finally out of the 90s, Ben. It was, it was pretty toasty yesterday. And then we got that storm front through last night. And I look at the forecast, I'm like, ooh, we might stay below 90 now. That's going to
it'll
be
rubber
nice
band
weather.
back, I'm sure. But yeah, it's starting to cool off a little bit. It's nice. Still fun to go in the pool though. Not too cold.
Yep, not too cold yet. Yeah, and I got the heat pump on it, so I can always crank up the heater if I need to, just in case. All right, gent. So let's get into articles. Now, there are 2 articles from the MWISE conference. So Google and Mandiant had their MWISE conference this last week in Denver. A couple really interesting leadership articles. The first one I'm going to start with is the Kevin Mandia article on what boards are asking, of Kevin. And this article is, it's pretty interesting to see the responses, because I was kind of coming up with my own responses. So the first question is, how good do I need to be? Just as good as your competition. Like, I'm just saying.
No, I know. Yeah, I mean, I really love the article. It was it was good because it reinforced a lot of what we've talked about over the course of years, right?
Yeah.
And really the core of it is, hey, run a risk framework. Run through a risk framework. Know what matters to your company, and have your business line owners figure out what matters most, and work with the CISO in that collaboration, right? I mean, it's good that that's getting on the big stages and being talked about.
It is. And what I find interesting is we do talk a lot about this around risk management and understanding risk and quantification of risk. It's one of the reasons I joined CyberSaint, right? Because this has been a difficult conversation to have for 20 plus years, as we all know. And when I'm reading this, I'm like, wouldn't it be really, really cool if you could come in, put in your industry, put in your employee size, put in your revenue, and see what all the top risks are of your competitors, which is exactly what we do, by the way. To actually answer these questions that Kevin actually walked through. I should have just handed him my software for his keynote and let him demo it to everybody and go, yeah, this is exactly what you need to be able to respond with.
Yeah. So did you guys find it interesting at all that the whole question around like, what's my competition doing? Like, I kind of feel like that's, look, if you're making a burger, right, and you're McDonald's or you're Burger King, like you're trying to compete against them, like that kind of makes sense, right? But like, in security, I only have to be as good as my competitor. Like, I'm not really sure that like.
Well, it's like if you're in the woods and you're being chased by a bear, how fast do you need to be?
Yeah, that's the common analogy, right? You only have to be faster than the guy behind you, but that doesn't work this way because he got eaten and you're getting eaten too. Like, you're just both getting eaten. There's more than one bear in the woods. There's fancy bear, there's cozy bear. I mean, there's a lot of bears.
And see, that's why out of this article, I took more of you need a risk framework.
Yeah.
And you need to rely on your business line owners to tell you what matters. Like that, those are the things I teased out of it the most.
But those are the answers, Jason. That's not what the board's asking. And that's where I'm going. Is like, again, back to what we talk about. Like, they're not educated. They don't understand. And it's just it's not the right conversations we're having with the boards, I guess. Right.
So I guess whose responsibility is it to educate the board on the right conversations that should be had? Right. And
in the 5 minutes we have to talk to him every quarter, like it does, I guess. That's the point.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I hear you. But I think the point about understanding kind of what your competition is facing and what your industry is facing is the attack vectors do shift. And we see this in our data, guys. Based on who you are and what industry you're in and kind of how you align, the risks and the threat vectors change.
Sure.
And I think it's a really good way to kind of baseline yourself. I'm not saying that that's the end all be all, Ben, but I think companies have a hard time baselining themselves against their own industry peers. And I think what he's saying is you kind of start there, put it into a risk framework, and then you work with the business lines to figure out what's really important to you so that you can actually kind of tweak those risks and figure out what you're going to do about them.
Yeah. Like, I don't want to belabor beating the dead horse here, but it also depends upon the industry, right? So like if it's financial, Yeah, okay. Like, what is, if Citi's asking what's Chase is doing, I think that's a relevant question, right? But if you're in healthcare and you're asking, hey, what did Change Healthcare do? That's probably not a great question, right? Like,
Yeah,
not
we're
a
going to
lot.
cover that. We're going to cover that one in a few minutes. But I hear you, right?
Yeah.
But that's why understanding historically what has been impacted in those industries should give you kind of a starting point potentially for how to manage a risk management program, which I think everybody still struggles with personally.
Yeah, I like the way you summed
later
it
in the article,
as a baseline.
Yeah, later in the article, there was a question about, is your CISO any good? And his response was, look, it's more about like, does he, is he answering the questions? It's not like what the answer is. It's is the theory behind the question and how he's approaching it like the right answer. And I think, again, that's getting to the better point of like, look, it doesn't really matter what you're doing as long as you're doing something and moving the ball forward, but don't just stay static, right? Mm-hmm. Have somebody there with security mind. I just like that method of approach better than a concrete answer. Well, if he's not talking about X, then you don't have the right guy. Like,
right.
It's all over the board and depends upon too many variables. So it's more about the approach and the process. So
yeah, I agree.
Which I think applies back to that.
Now, one of the last lines here is, I think the biggest bang for the buck today is doing tabletop exercises. And the reason I pull on the string is when we talk about the next article in CISA's framework, I think understanding the biggest bang for the buck is important because when I look at CISA's new focal, I think it's called focal, their focal plan, right? It's really wrapped around these kind of 5 priority areas. And I kind of challenge a couple of these, right? So CISA comes out and says, here's our focal plan overview for the federal agencies. And I like what they put out because I think people can use this as it's kind of a baseline or a guideline for how to manage their own program. And so I dig into the PDF. It's only 10 pages, people. The link's right in the article. And it starts with asset management. Well, yes, we've been talking about that for, I can't remember how long, right? Forever, right? So it does start with asset management, but then it jumps straight to vuln management. And I question, like, is that really number 2? And I'm going to say this, and I work for 2 of the big vuln management companies. Even if I understand my vulnerabilities, is that really going to give me the biggest bang for the buck to manage my overall risks? I'm not sure it is, but why do we always assume that you have to go from the asset to the vulnerability? I just question, is that like just old school thinking? And is that really the right way we should think about this stuff?
Looks like Jason and I are going to play devil's advocate either way on this one. So go ahead, Jason. I'll let you jump in because I saw you shaking your head and I'm like, I take a contrarian view here.
Yeah, well, at the end of the day, you're picking the top 5, and I don't think vulnerability management lands in that top 5 because if you have a good asset management program, vulnerability is baked into it, right? From a cybersecurity perspective, your asset management program should have a vulnerability capability within that.
It's not the same. It's not the same teams or groups. It ends up defaulting to that, right? Because you're running the vuln program. You don't have any good asset management, so you're forced to do it. But like I just look at that as 2 separate things. Like knowing what you have and knowing the scope, right, is also important. Incident detection response. It happens to impact supply chain, right? Defensive architecture. Mm-hmm. Like it underlies everything. I just think that like I'm surprised you guys are coming with this way from vuln management because my approach to vuln management is it's the hygiene, stupid. Like it's the thing we always miss. And so if there were no vulnerabilities, we wouldn't have an issue. Now prioritization and all that other stuff that plays into it.
But is that true?
Okay, go ahead.
Take the statement you just said. If there's no vulnerabilities, do I have an issue? Well, yeah, because absolutely. I could still have a compromised credential. See, I don't see, like, where's asset management, where's identity in here?
At a very high level, one could say the potential to compromise your, like, you could have a compromised credential because someone shared it. Okay, that's a different issue. It's a policy thing. I meant more in terms of the high level of, like, vulnerability management, 25 plus years, like, it's still a problem. Everybody knows hygiene's a problem. Nobody ever fixes it, right? So when I look at CISA saying, like, what do you focus on? Focus on the shit that you haven't focused on for the last 25 years. Like,
but I'd almost
these are the say easy, do hard things.
Yeah, but I would almost focus on the configuration over the vulnerability. Now, it depends on how you define the term vulnerability, because a misconfiguration to me is a vulnerability.
Mm-hmm.
But when they say vulnerability management, they're talking about old traditional vuln scanning. And I'm like, I think you get bigger bang for the buck doing configuration management right first. But yet that's not on here unless it's embedded in the defensible architecture. But again, I would want to have that early in the process, because if my systems are configured correctly, I'm going to reduce a lot of potential threat vulnerability stuff. So that's why I question the order of these priorities.
So I'm gonna be a little crazy here, right? And think Nirvana state. But I look at vulnerability management and configuration management again as part of a comprehensive asset management program that has stakeholders involved from every portion of the organization that should be stakeholders involved. So IT, cybersecurity, right? I mean, for me, those all fall under a comprehensive asset management program for me. As a CIO, I didn't own asset management. We owned asset management.
Yeah, nobody's structured that way though, Jason. But I don't necessarily, I mean, philosophically, I don't disagree with you, but like no one's really structured that way. Yeah.
Maybe we should.
It's just like in a vuln management program, like I don't think vuln management owns patching, right? Like that's an operational problem. Like you're not doing patching, you're not doing operational stuff.
No, but they're
right?
a stakeholder in the conversation though, right? They're a stakeholder in the overall governance of asset management.
Sure, 100%.
Right? And that's my point, is that these are the 5 top domains that they should be focusing on. And if it's built correctly, the governance of asset management should include configuration management and vulnerability management, the governance of it. These are 5 major domains that we're putting out there.
Mm. Okay, agree to disagree a little bit, but I get where you're going.
Again, because I look at these frameworks and I debate, like, is this really the right order? Is it the right things? Because I don't want to send mixed messages to the audience. Like, if I look at, so I'll just tell you historically from the data that I see, vuln management when it comes to true risk reduction is pretty low on the return side of the equation. And I go back to Kevin's thing saying, where's the biggest bang for the buck? Well, the biggest bang for the buck is doing tabletop exercises, preparing for an incident so that you're resilient to an attack. Okay, it's the 5th domain. I get it. It's over and under incident detection and response. But I could see a lot better, much higher return on investment around that than vuln management. Than vuln is number 2. Like, I think you have to have a really strong risk management framework in place that helps you prioritize which of these 5 areas are going to be the biggest bang for the buck for your organization. And I don't want to just take a generic, here's the 5 priority areas, do them in this order and you'll get to nirvana, because I'm not sure that's true either.
Right. And then one of the things that I pulled out of here is that there's no recover. There's no BCDR portion of this. Yeah. There's no recovery. Unless you're rolling it into incident detection and response, which I don't think it should be there. Right. Where's recovery in all this?
But I guess you guys read this a little differently. I read it more of the things you hit, the things that, pick 5 things that you can do first, right? Like, and I guess again, you know how I feel about tabletops. I think they're super important, right? And I think people do them wrong because they only involve the primary stakeholders. They don't address everybody around, who needs to be involved. But I think it's like they're almost, I feel like a grasping at straws thing. Like, what can we tell people just to do something to get moving, to start, right? Like it's a start, not a finish.
Yeah, and for me, I took it as this is where they're looking at getting alignment across every single federal branch, where they're saying, here are the things you have to be doing to align to a strategy. I mean, the point says this aims to align to a federal enterprise strategy to fight against cyber threats. Well, where's recovery in that strategy? They're trying to get every federal department aligned to a main strategy so that everybody's on the same page. All these federal departments are on the same page.
Yes, but one could argue that, like, okay, so if you're into response, you've already admitted that stuff's been happening. I think what they're trying to say is, how do you stop stuff from happening so you don't have to get to response? But you can't have 13 functional areas Vocal point.
No,
right?
great.
Like,
And I think that's the argument here is what should be those 5 main areas.
Right. Exactly right. And are these the right 5? I'm just saying, right?
Yeah.
Anyways, okay.
But we still love each other.
Yeah, we do. Absolutely. There's plenty of love to go around. So back to MWise, right? So UnitedHealth Group CISO comes up and goes, look, we basically had to start over after this ransomware attack. Like, that's a pretty big admission. Like,
and pay,
to start
and pay $22 million in ransom.
Yes.
And not have that go to the people. Yeah, and not have that work out, right?
And rebuild everything.
Yeah.
And there's still.
I mean, look, I have a dog in this hunt, but you could have had some ransomware prevention that would have cost a lot less.
Yeah. Like, I mean, you want to understand, and I think this is what, what's the worst case scenario? This is almost the worst case scenario. The worst case scenario is you go down and you never come back as a company. Right. Like, that's the worst case scenario. But this is pretty darn close, right?
Look, it says right in the article, they were able to save the cables. So that was good, right? Like, that's a positive. The only that's the quote. The only thing we kept from the old environment into the new environment was 100% the cables.
100% a quote.
There's routers, switches, compute infrastructure, everything. Like, yeah, that's a bad day.
Really? It's a really bad day.
And like, when you factor in, like, okay, the news headline, right, is $22 million payment. That's pennies.
Oh, yeah.
Pennies into what they spent, right?
Oh, this was a multi-billion-dollar recovery.
All the compute infrastructure, all the routing, everything is new.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just think about that, folks.
Any other organization would have crumbled.
Yeah. Yeah.
There was a war chest here. That's the other thing to think about, right? There was a lot of money on the back end of this that was able to get them back up. Because, most companies would not have been able to do that.
No way.
No.
No way. Crazy. All right, now we get into some leadership stuff. Those were good articles that came out of MWise last week, and I was like, oh, we got to cover those on the show because I think they're good learning lessons, right? Like, hearing Kevin talk about what he's being asked, but then to see that from a CISO of one of the largest, probably the largest healthcare organization on the planet, to be like, yeah, we basically had to start over. And in the billions they spent to put it back is just crazy. All right. How the next generation of managers is using Gen AI. So, really interesting article from Harvard Business Review. And I love this opening quote. It has become common to hear the statement, AI won't replace managers. Managers who use AI will replace managers who don't use AI. And this research article goes into how many existing managers are using AI, which is about 15%, versus how many of the up and coming managers through kind of business schools are using AI, which is like 40%. So it's a really interesting trend of managers using AI to be using that technology to actually kind of displace the old guard. Yeah, that by the way, that's how I will be replaced, by the way. A product owner that is using more Gen AI than I am.
Right. I mean, listen, at the end of the day, the adoption of new technologies and tools is always going to be the force multiplier for new managers. That's it, right? And we talk about AI being a force multiplier, and it will be. The managers are going to be able to get to answers quicker, be able to get to data quicker, and make better decisions faster. So it's the tools of the day that they're going to use to manage their departments, their organizations better. It's a tool. They have to use it as a tool.
I think, Jason, you were out a couple of weeks ago and we covered some of the hiring skills where AI was like in 0.2% of job listings, right? So it's not a skill yet that's being hired for per se.
Nope.
But what this is talking about is there are Gen AI skills coming into these management roles. It may not be a hard and fast skill requirement in a job opening, but it could give you a competitive advantage in some of those job search areas.
Sure, absolutely. I mean, think about it. Co-pilots being integrated into every single Office application at this point.
Yeah.
Learn how to use it, right? Yeah. It's going to become that basic technology like, that you'd be using in Word and Excel. Why are you going to sit there banging your head against a screen trying to figure out a formula in Excel when you can have Copilot build it for you? You have to start learning those skill sets.
Yeah, it is a little bit. Does this become a crutch though, right? Like, does this
as much of a crutch
like,
as Google became?
Do people lose the skills to functionally problem solve, right? Because they're just reliant on the technology to problem solve.
But we heard the same thing when Google came to play, and everybody was Googling everything, right? Oh, you're going to learn.
Yeah, but that's
the talent to research. You're going to lose the skills. I mean,
yeah. And my response to that would send a 20-something into a library and ask them to find a book. Like, it won't happen. Like, they can't use a telephone with a rotary dial for sure. We've seen the videos on that, right? But I card catalog, like I can't find the book. I'll be there all day, right? So do we need to go to the libraries? Maybe not. Maybe the argument can be that it's not something that we do every day. But I'm just wondering, at some point, have you seen the movie WALL-E? Like, I don't want to be riding around in a floating Barca lounger like 400 pounds just because I can't do anything on my own, right? Like I just question it. I'm an embracer of AI. I love it. I think it's doing a lot of neat things, right? Enabling faster motion, faster speed to get to the solution of a problem. But at the end of the day, I still think you need critical thinkers to be able to figure out what to ask AI.
100%. Right? Absolutely. Yeah. And the prompts are going to be key on how you design the prompt to get the right answers, right? I mean, that's going to be a critical piece to it. But you want to know what? Those floodgates are open. It's not going back.
Yeah, that genie's out of the bottle. For sure.
It's not going back.
But two things can be true at the same time, right? You can know how to use AI, and we can still educate the next generation on how to do critical.
100% agreed.
Because okay, so the problem with AI models is, you get provided an answer and you don't question the result, right?
Right.
Like, if
how
the
do you know
result
that the
is
answer
unintelligible, whether it's wrong, that's a failure in how we're building the model. But there's that between side of, like, if you were a critical thinker and you looked at it, you could say, this doesn't make sense to me, right? And so
100%.
then you build a car with square wheels and it doesn't work and you wonder why.
Yeah. I think critical thinking is still important. It's just, AI can provide some competitive advantage if you know how to use those tools effectively in your existing job, I think, right? And this goes back to, there are areas of generative AI that I think can do a lot of good. And I think there's a lot yet to be uncovered with what AI can do for us, right? And it's not, this ties into this next article a little bit, like what people think AI will eventually be able to do is nowhere near reality yet. But there are some very specific use cases where AI can be used today in very productive ways. But I'm not sure that when I look at what the financial analysts talk about in what AI can do, I'm like, yeah, we're not there yet, right? So I see this vision, but like, there's no way to get there yet. Not yet. But I think the technology will evolve to get us closer and closer to some of what people envision AI will do for us. We just have to understand its limitations today.
Of course. And I mean, some of the limitations in the technology, some of the limitations is in the level of compute that's behind it. Hence, I don't know if you saw the news, Microsoft going out and reopening a nuclear plant to help power some of their data centers.
Coming back, baby.
So
you too can have a meltdown.
That's right. So if that doesn't show an investment into the future, I don't know what does.
It's so, AI is interesting because I think a lot of people, especially in the tech field, approach it from like, job displacement, what's it going to do, what can it do? But there's a lot of other things it impacts. And there was an interesting thing I saw this weekend talking about how, consumption of energy, right? Like, we're all trying to think about how to get off of this energy consumption trend. But realistically, like, the more green energy that gets stood up, the more is consumed for AI and compute. And so we're not actually trending down on any energy uses. We're just consuming all the energy we can. And so, one has to ask themselves, how do we get out of these spirals?
Yeah. And I don't know that you can. Like, they're almost two competing initiatives. You want to use AI to power the world, great, but you need the power to do it. And solar and wind power are not going to fuel the next AI data center.
Which is my point. You need to have critical thinking, because at night, no AI, right? Like no solar. Like you got to think from midnight to morning.
You're gonna see more. We're gonna see more nuclear. I'm telling you. Watch.
Yeah.
Look, I worked nuclear power for 7.5 years. Like I never had an issue with it. I enjoy being in that space. I think it's a very efficient way to fuel the country. The one thing we have to do if we're going to do it is we do it like France did it, which is you standardize all the plants. Yeah. Because with a standardized plant, if you find an issue in one, you can go fix it in all the others. The problem, in my opinion, with U.S. nuclear power at the time was too many different plants, too many different designs. We didn't learn from each other. There was a little bit of learning because 3 Mile Island and Davis-Besse are similar designs from GE. But if you don't have the similar designs to be able to trickle down, you're never going to reduce the potential risk that we saw in the U.S. nuclear power industry for a while. Anyways, my 2 cents on nuclear power. Next article, bold vision with zero action, the fatal flaw in today's leadership. It's so funny. I see this, with startups, right? Like, we're going to go do this. And then they don't know how to get there. And I see this a little bit with AI, right? Like these bold visions for artificial intelligence with no way to actually execute to get there. Yeah. So this article kind of pulls all that stuff in.
I mean, it's the old adage that we've had around forever. Execution eats strategy for lunch, because you can build the best strategies in the world and stick them on a shelf. If you can't execute against them, they're worthless. Absolutely worthless.
Is this corporate ADHD? Is that what this is?
Partially. Like, if you think about it, Ben, like, remember the pressures, right? There's a couple different pressure area points, right? You've got a startup trying to get funding to try to differentiate themselves. So you got to have a bold vision, right? Because you got to differentiate yourself from all the other startups trying to raise capital. I get it. But you also have to have a path to execution. I think what we saw over the last couple of years is bold visions with no way to get there. And those companies don't exist anymore. Like they are pretty much gone. Right. Then you have the second pressure of, if you do become successful, you go IPO, now you're under the constant pressure of the stock market, right? And investors to invest in you. And it puts you through another whole churn of, oh my gosh, here's where we're going to go from a strategy perspective. But if you can't execute, guess what? You're never going to get to that realization. And then what you see is the private equity firms come in, you start snapping them up and taking them back private. So I think we see a few examples of this in the industry.
Yeah, but let's take it down to the leadership side of leading a team or leading the company. If you are a leader who is strictly about, I have a dream, I have a vision, we can do, but never do, that erodes the trust of your entire team.
Oh, yeah.
Trust is the foundation of everything. Every relationship, every business relationship, every company. Trust is the foundation. Has to be.
Yeah, you got to put points on the board, right? If you don't have anything as a track record to look back and be like, okay, yeah, I saw that. He said he was going to execute, and he did execute.
And then all that becomes is empty promise.
Yeah.
All becomes.
Yeah.
That's why execution eats strategy for lunch.
Yep. Which ties into our last article on leadership development. So we've covered Science of the People, multiple articles, and it was a pretty light news week. And so I was going out and I've been looking at her website for some other stuff, some training skills for my team. And I ran across this. I'm like, oh my gosh, this is a great article to cover. But more importantly, people, like, you should go sign up for her newsletter because the information in her newsletters, I think, are really, really good from a leadership communication perspective. She's got a ton of great articles and resources that you can get for free off of their website, even free training. So you don't even have to pay for most of the stuff that comes off of this website, but she does a really good job of organizing it, not only for your personal life, for business life, but also for your personal life. Like, there's a lot of personal, like, tips and tricks in here that'll just help you better in your skills. And so I ran across this article. I'm like, oh, this is a pretty good one for us to cover as we're talking through all these leadership challenges. How should we be developing our leaders? So she lays out this kind of 5 areas of how you should approach building out different leadership skills in an organization. Good read. obviously, Jason, you always look at order and topics, but just wondered if you had any comments here.
Yeah, no, I mean, in all honesty, I love that she really started with focus on the whole person program. I love that. I absolutely love that, because you're taking, the individuality of your folks and your staff, the emotional intelligence pieces to it, people's values. Then you have the ability to communicate and know your audience depending on what you know about your staff. So really looking at folks from that holistic side of the aisle, look at the whole person, not just what they bring to the table for your department at that point in time, right? It's really taking that holistic view. I love that that's the first portion of this. Dead on.
Yeah, and she lays out some really good approaches then based off of that whole person kind of approach, Jason. And again, I think it's a really good read for people who are trying to figure out how to develop leaders, because I went to her website to really help my staff develop their leadership skills. And so that's how I ran across this article and said, ooh, we should cover this on the show. Yeah.
No, I love it. I love the article. It's definitely the right focus. One of the pieces that I really liked, it was toward the end, I think it was like the second to last, is that once you start building that maturity out in your program, you can start crafting bespoke leadership journeys, depending on the individual, right? Because it all starts with the individual. That's that, right. Focus on the whole person program. But you're doing it right when you can start crafting these bespoke, individualized leadership journeys for your leaders and your managers. I think that's great.
Absolutely. All right, that's it for articles. We're going to take a quick break and then welcome Shiv and Ramji from Upland.